Hello, and welcome to Meltdown Comics in Hollywood, California. We are here with the one, the only Javier Grillo-Marxuach.
Hello.
Say hi. Just a little bit of hello, Javi.
How are you, sir?
I just ignored you. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming. As always, it is my co-host Adam from Meltdown.
Hey guys.
And welcome to An Evening With. This is a really nerdy deep dive into process. The whole point of this show is to interview and talk process with the most creative people working in the geek arts and Hollywood today. And so that's why we are honored to have arguably, it was just mentioned, the best writing job around right now, someone who's working on it, Javier Grillo-Marxuach. If you don't know him, we love that you managed to tune in anyway.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to meet you.
But Javi was just on the just announced Dark Crystal.
Yes.
Javi's credits are The Lost.
The Lost. Yeah, I was on The Lost for 2 years. Oh boy.
Lost, The 100, and of course, fan favorite, The Middleman.
Yes, indeed.
Also worked on Annihilation, the Marvel space event from 2007, 2008.
Yes.
I am the creator of Wraith, whom all of you know, right?
Yeah.
No?
I do.
Hello?
But
Fan?
That's what I'm here for.
So we're going to start off with some questions. We're going to get into the process, but this show is really about you guys talking to this guy. So we want to hear your questions. Go ahead and tweet them out. Go ahead and send them in, email, semaphore, whatever it takes. We have a little audience here.
Yeah, you can
which
always
we're very
show
excited
up
about.
and ask us a
You
question.
can come live, and we'll have you shout it
During
out.
the next hour, you can come to Meltdown Comics, and you know, it's so much different when we're in person, isn't it?
It makes
yeah.
all the
It
difference.
makes all
in
the
world.
difference, really,
And
yes.
you can buy stuff,
That is true.
which is always awesome.
Yes.
Because I know there's like lost figures over there, and you can buy them and then have Javi autograph them.
Yes,
Yeah.
and thus lowering their value.
We actually, right above your head, Keith, we have the Meltdown Mel in a Dharma Initiative
Indeed.
There you go.
Indeed.
little light
Indeed.
thing.
Well, let's jump into it. Let's talk about what's going on currently. Huge announcement this
Yes,
week. We blew up the interwebs.
We kind of broke the internet, and it was amazing because we weren't sure whether we would or not. I actually knew that we were going to break the internet because when I went in to meet for the job, when they told me what it was, and they showed me a reel that they'd done to sort of a proof of concept with the puppets and all of that. And I don't know what happened on the outside, but I busted out into the full ugly man cry on the inside, at least, because the movie is a real signpost for a lot of people my age, certainly, and I think a lot of people have grown up with it. So I was pretty certain that the internet was going to break, but I think a lot of people were wondering, well, how much do people remember the Dark Crystal and all of that? So it was great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so you guys, where are you at in the process of creating? I mean, obviously, usually shows are announced and there's a pilot,
Right.
But that's not the road that you guys have taken.
No, I mean it's going to be on Netflix, and it's a 10-episode series that serves as a prequel to the original film. So there are two guys who actually created the show. Their names are Jeff Addis and Will Matthews, and they're just superbly talented guys whose career has been primarily in features. So they've sold a lot of pilots as well, and so. Basically, they wrote the script that got greenlit with the supervision collaboration of Louis Leterrier, who directed Now You See It, and the Incredible Hulk movie with Ed Norton, the original Transporter movie. So Louis had been working with the Henson Company for a while on this. Jeff and Jeff and Will came in to create the series. They wrote a script. They've been at it for about 1.5 years now. So it's been a lengthy development process. So really, my job. As I came in was to be, like you've got guys who've written features and pilots, you've got a feature director, but they really needed somebody who understands the process of working in television. So anyway, I started working with them about 2 months ago, and we've been just breaking. The nice thing is that Jeff and Will created this phenomenal blueprint for the season. So a lot of shows you come in, they're like, we don't know. These guys really had planned it out. So the real pleasure of it for me has been to come into a show where there's a real strong, clear vision already in place. And my job has really been to provide really managerial support and creative support and help them, turn that into 10 episodes of television. And the God's honest truth is that they'd probably be fully capable of doing it without me. They're wonderful writers, and but we staffed a room. We've got a bunch of great writers, and we've just been chugging away at really creating the series and writing the scripts and all of that. So, because ideally, the entire series, not ideally, this is in fact my assignment, is that the series will be written before it goes into production.
That's great.
So, like one of the things Netflix, for example, did with Stranger Things is they had all of the scripts. They actually, read through all of the scripts and then, and then went into production. So it's a very different process from regular network TV where you sell a pilot, you put the room together, and you have 2 months, and then you go into production, and you're just racing ahead of production. Once this show is getting made, they'll know everything that's going to be in the show beforehand. So,
how does that impact you as a writer, especially when you're breaking stories, knowing that you'll know if you've made a mistake, you're not going to be able to sort of like fudge it in production?
Well, no, but we have a long time to write the scripts. I mean, we have about 6 months of lead time, and like I said, we're breaking these stories. So and as I said, Will and Jeff came in with a great blueprint. So we already had a very good idea of kind of, because that's how they sold the show. I mean, they sold the show based not just on the IP and all of that and on the great pilot script that they wrote, but they also sold it on having a plan. So, in terms of mistakes, I'm sure we will make them. But we've already, like for example, as we've been breaking all of the stories and even getting as far as very far into the season already, we're able to kind of look at it. And one of the things that the long lead time gives you is that you can start, if you need to pay off something in episode 10, because you're already breaking that episode or you know what's going to happen, then you can look back at all of your other story breaks and start planning those things and all that. So it's a very different process. Like, on all of the other shows I've worked on, like even something like The 100, where we had a very good idea of kind of what the season was going to be, once you go into production, all of the foci,
There you go.
are split.
An actual word.
An actual word, plural for focus. It's not focuses. If you learn nothing else today. So, even so on something like that, you start filming and you've maybe written about a third to a half of the season, not even that actually, probably about a third or a fourth of the season when you go into production. So you can't go back and retrofit something into episode 1 or 2, and in fact, you might be still finishing up the season by the time you premiere. So it's the same way on Lost. We premiered, we were breaking episode 7 or 8 around the time that we premiered, so if we wanted to go put something back in, we were not going to do that. There's just no way. It was aired, people knew it, it was canon. So this is actually really interesting because we actually get to look at all 10 episodes and say, oh, we want to do this here, this person is going to, I don't know, I mean, this person's going to find a magic object in episode 9, so we need to make sure that object, so what you do get to work out a lot more rigorously is sort of the planting and payoff of things. And I don't know if it's a loss, but one of the things I do love about working in the network model where you go into production and you're making the show is that you do tend to drop a lot of, it's sort of like improv where you get to drop a lot of assumptions and then you come back and pick them up later. So there's always stuff laying around when you're doing a show and you're on the go and you're producing it while you're writing it. The job becomes sort of what can you pick up to pretend like you meant it, But remember in episode 6 where there was that mistake where the camera did that? Yeah, but what if we say that happened on purpose and then all of a sudden your whole story reflects that on something where...
Wasn't that the whole series of Lost?
No. I wrote a very long essay about that,
Yes,
so...
you did.
Oh man, I gotta read that.
And it's still alive on the
It's on my webpage, yeah. It's if you go... Actually... If you're watching this, I'm assuming that you are here partially to talk about process. So if you're interested in process, the one thing I will say is, and I don't make any money off of this. This is something that is strictly, I'm not selling you anything. I don't want you to, but if you go to my website, which is okbjgm.com, in the download section, I have pilot scripts, pitches, Bibles, for everything that I have sold in the, not the most recent stuff, obviously, because a lot of that is NDA stuff. But you can go back and see what pitches I sold, how I wrote them as pilots, what changed, all of that. So all those documents are out there for people who are interested in becoming writers to look at. And I'm not saying that the way that I do it is the best way to do it, but this is a way that a professional has done it to fair to middling success.
Well, so. that's one of the reasons I'm so excited that you're here. And we're going to get to comic books in a second.
Yes.
But you are not only have just an inordinate amount of humility for having been in Hollywood for as long as you've been here.
Well, some would say I have a lot to be humble about.
So I won't go there. But your generosity with your podcast, The Children of Tendu.
In fact, actually, wait, Seamus, you need to come here for a second.
We have a.
So actually, here, Children of Tendu podcast. There you go. That's Seamus. So there you go.
And this is, you know, there's this master class thing that's
Yes.
$99, and I believe they can get more from Children of Tendu, which costs
Nothing.
than spending $99 and learning it from who's that guy?
It's
The West-
well, it's
the East
Aaron's. Well, here's the
Wing,
thing.
West
Here's the thing.
something?
And look, I hate to bag on another writer. Do I? Do I hate that?
You do.
No, you do. You do.
genuinely do.
But it's interesting because, no, you know, it's funny. Look, we try to. I'm not even going to get into the Aaron Sorkin of it. You know, I'm sure that there are many great lessons to be gleaned from his master class, and I don't want to get into it. But look, I feel that it's hard enough to do TV as it is. The business is mystified. It is rarefied. It is hard to get into. It's a very small business. You know, there's only as many working TV writers, even now, as there are professional NBA players. I mean, it's a very small pool of people who actually get to do this job that we do. And one of the reasons why we put the podcast out there for free, why I put my outlines out there and my synopses and my scripts for free and all of that, are specifically so that when you get to a writer's room with me or with Jose or whoever, that you know what you're supposed to do, you know, because it's like the creativity of it is the hard part. Everybody who wants to should know the structure, should have access to it. And if you're watching this and you're going to be a TV writer or you want to or whatever, my hope is that when you get to where you're going, you'll share that information with other people so that at the very least they can appreciate what you go through in doing what you do, you know?
And that's my point, as to you're so generous with it, and
Thank you.
I think that there's going to be a whole generation of people who have come up with the Javi and Jose method.
I
Jose
hope so.
Molina,
You know,
by the
Jose
way.
Molina, yes, who is my partner in podcasting. Also, we also teach a class that's like the podcast at the Writers Guild for people who are sort of in the middle of their careers, you know, to sort of, because a lot of people now. The other thing that I'm finding out, you know, look, when I started working in TV, and we've got questions coming in, so I don't want to.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I was
we'll-
going to jump to that soon.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
so-
going to talk comic books and then we'll get to
So one of the things that happens is that, you know, when I started in television, you would get on a show, and if you were lucky, you'd be there the whole year. It was 22 episodes, and you had a staff writer year. You had you literally went through a real ladder. And now shows get canceled more frequently. A lot of the showrunners are not experienced managers. They themselves are learning how to make TV on the network's dime while they make a show. So there isn't that mentorship, and there isn't that sort of slow ascent to the top. So what you wind up having is a lot of people who have no experience in managing, in talking to people, and communicating a strong, clear vision to their staff and all that. And, you know, look, the result of it is my personal experience has been that I've worked on a lot of shows where there's been a lot of sort of madness, rage, and abuse. And if we can just make the smallest dent, because the industry already just structurally tolerates a lot of toxic upper management anyway. So for me and Jose, it's really about, you know, ending a cycle of abuse, you know, and saying, we're trying to tell a lot of truths so that when people get out there into the business, they don't feel like that no one ever told them how to behave. Like, we want to eliminate the excuse, well, nobody ever told me I couldn't do this. I'm like, we're telling you now, you know, so.
I describe it as commitment to the craft, not the business.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is admirable. So, comic books
Comic
is
books.
where your life, that was what got you started as a
Yeah,
comic book fan.
Actually, yes, I used to go to the, when I was in my pre-teens and teens, I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I used to take the University of Michigan bus with my friends, and we'd go to the Eye of Agamotto, which was the local comic
Great.
book store, and yeah,
That's a great name.
before the movie, when it was
course.
weird to
Oh,
know what the
yeah.
Eye of Agamotto was. And we, you know, and look, and I had the incredible fortune of coming of age when the Ninja Turtles was a zine, when Frank Miller was doing The Dark Knight as a monthly, and when The Year the Watchmen was being released, you know. So it was a really interesting time, and, you know, you have stuff like Ronin and Elektra, and Cerebus was kind of in its peak at that point. So it was a really interesting time for comics. So yeah, I mean, that was a huge introduction for me to storytelling.
So, you know, you've mentioned some really great comics just now. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, like, what
Although
is-
really the lesson of Cerebus is don't become a raging misanthrope
Oh my God,
and
yeah.
write an entire issue as a rant against women, right? That's
Yeah.
okay, good.
Yeah, not even going to touch that one.
Yeah, we're not getting near that.
The non-kosher.
Yes.
I mean, so the couple of questions I really had sort of in mind for you is, like, is there one series you can really think of that had, like, a major influence on you as a writer? Slash, do you remember, like, the first comic that you read that was like, oh,
You know, it's interesting because I, reading The Dark Knight Returns, I hated everything the book was about. Okay.
Okay.
Because I thought even at the age of must have been 13, 14, 15 when that book came out, probably 13. I hated the way that Frank Miller treated Superman.
That's
because
totally fair. Yeah.
I'm a Christopher Reeve fan.
Yeah.
That's the Superman I grew up on. And I always thought, and it's funny because people still talk about how hard it is to do Superman, but then I go like, I don't know, Marvel movies don't seem to be having a problem doing Thor and Captain America, so how hard can it be? Pretty hard, by the way, but not as hard as the plaints of several creators would lead you to believe.
It seems like it took them 3 movies to get Thor anyway.
I think they've done a great job with that character, who should be, But one of the things that I remember that blew my mind about The Dark Knight was Frank Miller's the structure of his storytelling. Things like the television screens, his layouts, like all of that stuff. Even at an early age, I was looking at that stuff and going, "Oh my God, the way this guy tells a story is amazing." And I think also the other thing that was really formative for me was that, look, the most important comic in my life was actually Mad Magazine, which I know that there's a lot of debate as to, is it a comic, is it not? I don't know. Anyway, but I during that time I also did a lot of reading about William Gaines and Harvey Kurtzman and Nick Meglin and Don Martin and a lot of the people who were involved during the real heyday of Mad Magazine. And I think what Mad Magazine was in the late 60s, in the 70s, and in the early 80s, it was sort of a primer on the counterculture.
Oh,
And
100%.
and I like to think that I probably learned more about the evils of capitalism from Mad Magazine than I did from my college degree in cultural studies. Meaning no disrespect, I learned quite a bit there too, because the content of the magazine was so and so I think that between what Frank Miller was doing in terms of how he drew and how he told stories, even though I didn't like the stories he was telling, and what Mad Magazine was doing with content. That alone was a huge education for me. And look, at the same time, things like the Secret Wars were happening. So it was also a really interesting time because those things were in their gestational phase at that time. So you sort of got to see, real titans of comic books figuring out how to do things that now are sort of the norm.
Right. Yeah.
So
Secret Wars changed the game completely.
Yes. And it was, it really did change the game, and it was one of those things that was really exciting when it was coming out. So even if you didn't necessarily love the stories that were being told, you still were really, the place where that affected me most was in terms of the structure and how they were creating those events and stuff like that. So
how has that affected the way you write stories now?
it's been crucial to the way I write stories now. I mean, it's funny. My TV career sort of hit its, a lot of people think that my TV career sort of started with Lost, which is funny because I'd already sort of been writing for like 10 years. But it's fine because it's nice to be associated with a success like that. But what's interesting about it is, the moment that I hit that part of my career where TV was beginning to change, it actually started to change in a way that made it resemble a lot of the narrative storytelling that I grew up reading. Look, one of the things I say about science fiction and comic books is that I think I liked them a lot more when they were disreputable. It was a lot more fun, sort of, like reading comics when like it wasn't as. And look, people who complain about Comic-Con being too big, I'm like, shut up. That's what winning looks like. You don't hear sports fans complaining about the Super Bowl being too big. So like, don't take this as one of those. Things were better back when. But comics when I was reading them in the sort of during the beginning of my interest in comics and when I was a preteen and all of that, were really sort of striving to find new ways of telling stories and doing what they do. As evidenced by things like the independents that were coming out at the time, things like Cerebus and the Ninja Turtles, and the events that Marvel and DC were pioneering at the time and all of that, which were experiments in serialized storytelling spanning multiple universes, multiple characters. So TV changed. I got into a position where I was actually making television and having a real sort of position of responsibility and influence in television at exactly the right time when TV became like the stuff I grew up reading. So they've been crucial. That experience
Lost
is crucial.
is the game changer.
Absolutely,
that is the pivoting point
Yeah.
to this new golden age.
I think it's Lost, it's The Sopranos, it's The Wire, it's a lot of shows, but Lost is certainly a standard bearer of it. I'm extraordinarily proud to have been involved with it. And look, a day didn't go by on Lost that we didn't talk about the Black Freighter, that we didn't talk about well, maybe more, some days would go by, but that staff would get together and we'd go to House of Secrets and That was it because the show was in Burbank. We couldn't drive to Meltdown.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
Yes, you were on the Disney lot.
We were on the Disney lot.
That's fair.
Easy
Small
there,
world.
Chief.
You know.
Okay, don't yeah. But
There's the Javi laugh.
so yeah, anybody who listens to the podcast recognizes the hyena-like trill, don't they? But no. So I mean, that was and we were very very influenced by that. I think between comic books of the mid '80s and Stephen King, you pretty much have the entire cosmology of Lost.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, look, the people who wrote that show would want you to believe that it's our knowledge of classical philosophy, as evidenced by our use of John Locke, but it was comic books and Stephen King.
Let's get a couple questions
Okay.
from the online world. In Twitter, this is probably the question you hate the most, and this isn't really a deep dive question, but we'll ask it. People want to know, what's up with Xena? You're
What's
doing
up with
Dark Crystal.
Xena?
What's up with Xena?
I have sadly left the Xena project.
But it's still moving forward.
No.
No, it's dead?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, when you leave a project, you hope that it dies horribly because, how could it possibly go on without you?
Exactly.
I mean, come on. No, look, the fans of Xena are phenomenal. Like, I mean, they are. I've actually hanged out at the Xenite retreat for the last 2 years with like the real hardcore of the fans. Do you know about the Xenite retreat?
I do.
Okay,
I don't. Tell
Steven
me.
Sears has
Yeah.
been pimping it on Facebook.
Well, okay, so basically Creation had the Xena convention for 20 years, and at a certain point they went like, guys, we're out of t-shirts. You've all had your photo taken with Lucy, right? But these fans are so diehard and they're so awesome that they basically said, nah, we're doing it. And they started a retreat and they get together and they hire out a ranch and they have all of these Xena-related activities. And I've, and last year, when the retreat was in its first year, I was just coming off of the 100, and it was a really rough time for me because I had killed a lesbian character on the 100. Well, I mean, the show killed off the character, but it was my name on the script, and that was a big controversy and all that.
That was a huge controversy.
And as you might imagine, there's a lot of crossover between those fans and the 100 fans. And, they invited me to go, and I was like, guys. And they were like, no, come. And they were just phenomenal to me. So I hope that the project isn't dead because I think that those fans deserve a Xena that really represents for them everything that project meant for its most diehard fan base. And it's certainly what I was trying to do with my script. But ultimately, I just had some very profound creative differences with the creators of the original that were just insurmountable. And after a year and a half, I needed to move on. Just, I have a kid who needs to be fed. And I have a house that I need to pay for and stuff like that, and it was heartbreaking, but it was something where we just couldn't make it go. I couldn't give them what they wanted and get what I wanted, and do everything that needed to be done, and it just became something where I had to leave. So look, I hope that this project is being made. I hope that. But I honestly don't know anything about what's happened since my departure. So
that's a great segue, though, because you talked about the departure was really about creative differences.
Yes.
And so Periscope, there was a question on Periscope about how important is creative control? Is that, what does that mean for you? And what does that mean really in the writer's room anyway?
You want creative control, obviously, and you want to have the ability to say what goes on screen. The closest I've come to having full creative control on anything, obviously in my independent comic books, like the Middleman comic books were published first by Viper Comics, and now I have them on my webpage, and they're on Amazon, and you can get them. And then I've put out a couple other comic books since then. Like I have a comic book called Ramiel, Wrath of God, and there's one called Animal Badge. Thank you, sir. But like I do those because I get full creative control, and it's just me and the artist. And actually I don't have full creative control because the artist is going to draw in his or her style. But it's a very close collaboration. But here's the thing: when you want to, but those books are bought by very few people. I've lost money on most of them, and it's okay because they're these little things I want to put out into the world and have the world look at them and be happy, On something like the Middleman TV show, that was my show. I was the showrunner, and there was not a production company or a pod or rights holders or anything like that, or original creators or anything like that. But I was still, look, when you sell a pilot, what you've basically done is you've convinced the network. Imagine convincing a bank to give you a loan to build a house on land that the bank already owns. That's about as good a metaphor as I can say for selling a TV show. You're getting money from a studio network to put up a series that's going to be in their airtime, which is their real estate, So you never have full creative control because you're always going to have a boss, On Middleman, I was lucky. The network had read the comic book. They liked the comic book. They knew what I was going to do. They knew how silly it was going to be. And they let us do the show that I wanted to make. So, you know, when people come to me and they say, oh, we're really sad the middleman's done, I'm like, don't be sad it's over, be happy it happened, because this show has no right to live. You know, it's like a show that weird and silly and all that, and it's because I had a great network, you know, and all of that. So, look, the other thing about creative control is, you know who had full creative control? George Lucas on The Phantom Menace. You know?
Ooh, yeah.
Full creative control.
Yep.
So, Steven Spielberg in 1941, full creative control, you know? So honestly, and on the other hand, when those two guys made Raiders of the Lost Ark, they had, they had Philip Kaufman, the writer and director of The Right Stuff, the writer of The Unbearable Lightness of Being. They had Lawrence Kasdan, I don't have to tell you who he is, you know, in the writer's room with them creating that stuff. And you can see, look, when you look at the relative quality between Raiders of the Lost Ark as a film and then the quality of Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, and ultimately Crystal Skull, you see what happens when you give somebody full creative control, you know? So the fact of the matter is, what you want to have is a really good blend of limitations and the ability to call the shots, you know? The limitations make you more creative. Sometimes those limitations are the network isn't there to fuck you over. Oh, okay, can I swear?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so the network's not really there. Look, how I treat networks and studios is I treat them as creative partners who've given me money to do something. Now, hopefully they trust me that I have a good idea, but at the same time, you know, they're there to protect their brand and to keep you on brand. So hopefully in that push and pull, you know, that becomes a limitation that you turn into an asset. And that's what it's really about for me, you know. So
I want to use that as a to ask about with creative control and with the middleman you had it. One of the things that is your hallmark is your wordplay. You are incredibly pop culture referential.
Yes.
You can go as deep as anybody that I know to reference stuff that I've never even heard of. Like if there was a Russian comic book in the 50s, you could probably throw in a reference to it in Middleman. How did you, because that's very much your voice.
yes.
Yet when you had complete creative control, you had to lead a team that was using your voice, but they sort of ended up just as adept as you.
Oh yeah,
How
no, they were
did you
great.
manage that from a process?
Well, look, I mean, here's the thing. Every showrunner needs to be able to do that, and it's amazing how few do and how few embrace the idea that as a showrunner, what you're really doing is teaching your staff how to write like you. You know, and actually showrunners, you know, it's one of the things I find are most lacking in showrunners, because that job to me is a service job. You need to share your vision with everybody so they can execute it. I tried to be very generous on the middleman. I tried to be very giving, and I tried to be very open about what I wanted and how I wanted to see it done. And look, I had a staff of extraordinarily talented writers who picked up my voice like that. And I look at that when people say, oh, it's so hard to get a staff to learn your voice. I go, look, I mean, I'm not going to say it's as good as, but it's certainly as idiosyncratic as Amy Sherman Palladino or even somebody like Aaron Sorkin, you know. And I was able to get a group of a half a dozen writers to write me better than me within one round of scripts. So whenever a showrunner says to me, oh, I can't get anybody who'll do my voice, I'm like, well, maybe you need to try a little bit harder at being a showrunner and a little less hard at being a visionary auteur who no one can fully understand, which is a huge showrunner disease, you know. And look, in terms of my own individual voice, I got to tell you, it's kind of been a problem because I've been on shows where, look, every time I hand in a first draft of a first script on a show, and I'm talking about, like, you know, this is something Jason Rothenberg said to me on The 100, this is something that Damon said to me repeatedly, this is something that Neil Baer said to me when I handed in my first draft of the Law and Order I wrote. You know, I think Neil Baer said to me, I'm going to take out all the quippy dialogue. You know, so I always get the note that the stuff is too quippy and bantery, you know, and that's my fault because I should know better. I'm in a show, I want to execute your vision. So that's actually, you know, like it took me far longer than I should have as a writer to learn that my idiosyncrasies were not the focus of the work I was doing. But I've also taken that lesson into my own sort of being a senior level producer and using it. And you know, I try to show the people who work with me kind of, here's how you write this show if I'm not the showrunner. I'm like, look, here's what the creators are doing, and I try to use my position as a high-level producer to say, we really should be trying to hit these targets because this is how the characters are. You know, because if the showrunner can't be bothered to teach, then if I'm the number 2 or I'm a co-EP or something, then I take that on as part of my job to say, look, you just don't want to get the note that your dialogue's too jokey on the first draft, you know. So,
so it sounds like one of the lessons that our viewers might be able to take away as a starting writer or as someone who's in the middle of their career is when you're not the guy on top, learn how to write like the guy on top.
Oh, absolutely. Look, 90% of the job of a TV writer is mimicry, you know, and hopefully the other 10% is getting to do exactly whatever the hell you want, you know? But to succeed in a show, it's that tightrope between, you know, I'm providing my experience, my ideas and all that, but I'm able to execute the vision of the showrunner. And where the real artistry comes in isn't in saying, I'm an artist, it must be my script or nothing. It's in saying, I have something I want to say. Whoop, I just hit the microphone. It's in saying, I have something that I want to say, and I'm figuring out how to do it, how the showrunner wants it. You know, so that, because, look, the showrunners range from the very humble to the insufferably narcissistic, but even the most humble, there's nothing a person loves most than reading something and seeing themselves in it, you know? And especially if you're a showrunner, like you really like it, you know? And that's the gift you're trying to deliver to the showrunner. You're trying to surprise them with your ideas and your thematics and all that, but you're trying to make them think they wrote it. And if you succeed in that, you're probably both tremendously talented and you're going to do well, and you're also probably a little bit fucked because they won't realize just how much work you did, you know? So, but that's part of the dichotomy of being a TV writer when you work for these, you know, sort of autocratic geniuses. That sometimes happens, you know?
So, do you have anything you want to jump in with?
Yeah,
since I've been
it was
dominating?
just another question from Twitter, I believe. They were asking about, you know, the networks versus Netflix.
Yeah.
And in terms of creative control, like, who do you prefer? Obviously, this is like the first Netflix thing I think you've done.
Yeah, this is actually my first job on Netflix. Although I've pitched things to them in the past and stuff like that. Look, the fundamentals of the job don't change. You get notes from your studio, you get notes from your network. Netflix, my experience with them so far has been that their notes are very thoughtful, they're very rigorous, and you know, and they haven't micromanaged us certainly. But I think part of that is because the executive producers who created the show, and I keep saying their names because I want to, because I feel like people should. They want to be very private, but Will Matthews and Jeff Addis are phenomenal writers. They're great people. They're great producers, and I think. You know, look, they set up a great template for the show and a great long-term arc.
What's their names again?
Will Matthews and Jeff Addis.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Will Matthews and Jeff Addis. I hope they're watching this. No, look, I mean, they set up a great template for the show, so like the network knew when they picked it up what they were going to get. And by the way, that's you know, a lot of people complain about notes. You know how you mitigate notes? By being transparent, by making sure you have a plan, you figure out your plan, and you share it with everybody so that everybody knows the plan. You know.
No surprises.
No surprises. Yeah, I mean, it's like, again, these are not this. There is such a narrative of, oh, the evil network. And whenever I hear somebody, you know, okay, so I had, I'm sorry to digress, but the best convention experience I ever had.
Was at LA Comic-Con.
Yes.
Stan Lee's
Absolutely.
LA
Stan Lee's
Comic-Con.
LA Comic-Con, yes.
October 27th through the 29th at the LA Convention Center.
You have to have that on my birthday, don't you?
Of
You
course.
should celebrate my birthday.
Wait,
at
it's your
convention,
birthday.
yeah.
It's your birthday party.
Oh, cool.
We
really?
do it for you.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank God I go.
The rest is just a subtitle. Like,
So I went to a panel, and it was one of the last panels that Robert Justman was ever on. Now, Robert Justman was one of the producers of the original Star Trek, right? And because he was on the panel, that one of the old school Trekkies, Trekkers actually, they wouldn't want me
Yes,
saying
Trekkers.
Trekkers. One of the old school Trekkers gets up and goes, "Are you still mad that NBC was so terrible and they canceled the show?" And Justman gave the best answer I've ever heard given to something like that. He said, "What are you talking about? This show had horrible ratings and NBC kept it on for 3 years. In my mind, they supported the show enormously." And I keep thinking, that is, and honestly, I was in my early 20s when I was at that convention, and it has framed my perception of networks and studios ever since. It literally makes me go, okay, that's what those people are doing. They're giving me money to be an artist. So, you know, if you can't collaborate with them, or you feel like you're defending against them, you're doing it wrong, you know? Whenever I'm in that position, and I encourage the showrunners that I work with to do the same, it's all about communicate, communicate, communicate. The more they know what you're doing, the less they're going to come at you with, "We don't understand this," you know. So look, I think because the show was so well planned, even before I got hired on it, I feel like, you know, Netflix has been very good about letting us execute that vision. And look, networks can be great, and they can also be terrible. You know, the thing is, all networks have great executives, and great executives are the ones who have the courage to go, "You're doing great. Thank you, and we're going to give you a few notes, or we're going to give you a couple notes, or we're not going to give you any notes, or here's," you know, I worked with there was one network executive I worked with, who my first gig, I was shadowing her, and she was the VP of NBC Network, and we went to the set of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And we saw a reading of the script, and the executive says, "Do you have any notes?" And I'm like, "Yes, on page 1, I don't think this joke lands very well." And she goes, Javi, these guys are pros. They know what jokes didn't land much better than you do, okay? If you can give them 3 solid big picture notes, you've done your job. And I've taken that with me wherever I've gone, because honestly, I think that a lot of people feel like they have to tell you, well, I'm bumping on this line, or this thing didn't land, or da-da-da, you know? Whereas, you know, like, writing scripts is an incremental process. You hand in a writer's draft, you do rewrites, you get notes, you do more, you look at it. So it's like, you know, the idea that, you know, like I've been on shows where we get, you know, you get 10 pages of notes on a 12-page outline. And you want to kill yourself because you're going like, first of all, there's no way I can fulfill everything you're asking me to do. And the other thing is, this is too much. You're not respecting my process either, you know? So I think there's a balance, you know, between, you know, and so the courage to be able to say, you're doing great, you know, we'll revisit some of these later. So here's a couple of really important notes, recognizing that this is an outline, and then it'll be a script, and then it'll be another script, and another, you know. And those executives, the good ones and the bad ones, are everywhere. So it's a real, you know, so honestly, am I loving working for Netflix? Absolutely I am. I think they're phenomenal, you know. At the same time, you know, I have worked on networks and had great experiences at networks. So I think that to make a blanket indictment of one over the other is not, you know. And look, honestly, I think you can also do really great work at networks because you have certain limitations. You have commercial breaks. You can't use profanity. You know, there may be more of a formula for what type of show they want. I think that those things bring out creativity in different ways too. So, you know, I don't think you can malign the art of one network at its best over the art of another network at its best or at its worst either, you know?
Well, and I think you're also touching on the fact that writing and production of television is way more of a team sport than people realize. And that's why there's so many long names when people collect the awards afterwards, because those people are recognizing it's not just them. But as part of that team sport, just like in baseball, just like in football, the front office, the guys in suits are just as much a part of the team as the guys on the field.
Absolutely. You know what? And apropos of which, I'm not a big fan of the sports ball, but there's a movie called Moneyball. Have you seen Moneyball?
Yes,
It's a phenomenal movie, and look. There's a couple of really great movies about showrunning. I think Moneyball is actually one of them, although I'm not entirely sure that the way Brad Pitt's character behaves is one I would emulate. But the other one is a movie called Topsy Turvy, and it's about Gilbert and Sullivan putting up the Mikado. And I know that sounds like spinach, but it's a Mike Leigh film. Jim Broadbent is in it, Anne Cordonnet, Timothy Spall. It's a beautiful film, and it's all about showrunning. And it's all about the team sport of it, and it's all about appreciating that every person, including your agent, including the executives, are really plying an art and a craft, you know? Some do it well, some do it badly. But I think, you know, and look, the thing is, we're in an era that's rewarding, I think, in many cases unjustly, the visionary showrunner, you know? And you know, we have much nicer pictures of us taken nowadays, you know, because like you literally see pictures people are styled and they're doing like, you know, whatever. You get to the Hollywood Reporter, you know, and it's like the showrunners are in black and white photos going like, you know, whatever, you know, so it's hilarious because I know some of those guys and you go like, dude, what are you doing? Take your hands off your face. But the thing about it is that, you know, the showrunner has to take the lumps and the praise. But I find that when the praise comes in, you know, look, if you take the lumps, you can handle the lumps. You're good. You know, you're the best paid person. Well, the actors probably get paid a little bit more, but you're one of the best paid persons in the show, and the buck stops with you, so you can take the lumps. When it's accolades, I think it's always good to acknowledge the degree to which it is a team sport, you know, because it ultimately is sort of all about you, and I think that should actually free you to make it not about you, to make it about how you are able to give to everybody else the instruction on what it is that you want done and let them excel in their craft, you know?
So how much of the idea that it's a collaborative team sport, when you were in school, how much was that impressed upon you? Because my impression of most writing programs is that it's about the art and it's all about you.
Yes. Yeah, look, I was lucky. I went to the USC graduate screenwriting program, and you know, I had a great education in screenwriting. And you know, I actually felt like the seminar environment there was pretty good about you know, teaching you how to take notes, teaching you how to take notes from colleagues and all of that. But look, at the end of the day, I think writers kind of have to have the narcissism either beaten out of them or validated into monstrosity. And I've met a little bit of both, but I've met many for whom it's literally been validated into monstrosity, and what are you going to do? But I feel like once you get to be a showrunner, the most unseemly quality in a showrunner for me is insecurity. And sadly, that is probably the most endemic disease in our business. Is just this toxic insecurity that mostly comes out of childhood daddy issues. But it really boils down to the idea that once you get to be a showrunner, you are the one calling the shots. So if you don't project certainty and artistic confidence, how are people supposed to do their job? And I think, look, in terms of my education, I went to a screenwriting program. We were being taught to be feature writers. So even though we were given a great education in taking notes and addressing notes and looking at criticism and all that, it wasn't until I got into the writer's room that a lot of that, and look, maybe it was a good thing that I had I worked for some pretty rough people at different points in my career, and maybe it was a good thing that I had some of those lumps that I had to take, because I think that they've beaten a lot of the at least toxic tendencies out of me. By virtue of being so toxic that I went like, oh my God, I don't want to be you, But I also think that it's one of the issues with orders being shorter, people's tenure in shows being shorter, people not getting to advance at a slower pace, is that you don't learn the team sport of it, And I think that, I honestly, and look, I don't look at the television of the early 90s and go, boy, that's how we should be doing it now, because, but at the same time, one of the benefits of that system that is being lost is the dues paying, is the lengthy apprenticeship, which I think all creative people need, in order to, and especially in television, where as a creator, you're going to be promoted to being a manager, and you need to see both good and bad management in action in order to know how to do it,
So let's give the audience a little taste of Children of Tendu. I'm going to let you ask the bottom question there from Periscope, because this is a very Tendu question, I think. Don't you think?
Oh God.
Oh boy, I get this one.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right, so tell us about your worst network meeting.
It was actually a studio meeting. It was at a studio where I had not worked for a while because I had done a pilot there that had gone very poorly. And finally, I was invited back there to pitch, and I came in with a well-known feature director on a known IP. So I figured this is awesome, and I think what happened was that about halfway through my pitch, the president of the studio remembered who I was.
Oh, oh no!
Because when I stopped pitching, and look, I talk fast. I think you've noticed that probably. I have a very animated style of talking. I pitch even more energetically, and it's more of a performance and all of that. On the other hand, like one of the biggest fears I have as somebody who didn't grow up with English as a first language, with somebody who grew up in another country who sort of adopted to this culture, is that fear that it's that dream you have where you get up on a stage and you open your mouth and it's just gibberish coming out, right? So I pitch my little heart out, and the president of the studio turns to his two senior level vice presidents and goes, "Did anybody here understand a word this guy just said?"
Oh no.
And that was followed, by the way, by 20 minutes of notes on the pitch. Because at that point, I would have been like, "I'm out. Okay, thank you, sir. Namaste."
Oh my God, that's brutal.
Well, it was brutal, but it was also like, and I'm sure that this guy in his, I don't think he went out and did any research about my childhood phobias of not being understood. But it was like he had, because, here's the thing. You tell a Puerto Rican immigrant who, learned English and has spent his entire life learning how to use English to communicate complicated ideas through narrative, and then you hit him with that. Oh my God, it's just devastating. I don't think I'll be working at that studio again. So
well, you never know.
No, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Unless that person is fired or dead or killed or something, I don't think it's going to happen. So, but that was hands down, and I've had some pretty crappy network meetings, but hands down that was the first. That was the worst. Really, really bad. Yeah. And it wasn't that long ago, and it just goes to show you can be, again, a fairly successful person who works and has a reasonably good reputation in the business, and I'm really blessed to kind of be where I'm in my career, but you can still have that gut punch thrown at you anytime.
And now we know why your Alf reboot never happened.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, so we've got one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. This has been great so far. Do you want to hit because it's a little bit comic book focused.
Oh wow,
that's your world.
Top one or the bottom?
Bottom one.
Bottom one. All right. Yeah. who has been your best working like comic book writer-artist
wow.
collaboration, and why?
You know what? I've worked with awesome artists. I mean, the guys who did the Marvel stuff I worked on were phenomenal. I worked with Kyle Holtz on the Wraith book, and he was just.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and look, but I think that I honestly think there was Les McLean, who was the artist of The Middleman, and I think he's doing a book for he's doing a like a prestige book now. His First Third, is that the name of the what's the name of the
First Second?
First Second? I
Yeah.
don't know, yeah.
That's a question for him.
They were too classy for me. They didn't hire me. But I think he's doing a book for them now. But I think I had a really great. Les is one of the best, in terms of his layouts are beautiful. His character acting is phenomenal. So he started The Middleman, and he created that universe and those characters in visual. And it was a wonderful collaboration. And then something really phenomenal happened, which is that there was an adaptation of the TV show that we did our last episode as a comic book. And I worked with Les. Actually did the layouts for that. But then the artist who drew the books was an artist named Armando Zanker, Zanker. Look him up. He's wonderful. And then when we did a crowdfunded revival of The Middleman, Les and Armando actually tag teamed on the book, because the book was a crossover between the comic book Middleman universe and the TV universe.
Oh wow!
So Les did the comic book part, and Armando did the TV part. And the comic book part was in black and white. The TV part was in color, because Armando's style was a little bit, you know. So, and then I wound up doing another book with Armando, a book called Animal Badge. But I think that, I mean, look, if I had to say, you know, like obviously Les and I have this gestational formative experience of, you know, he's the first comic book artist I collaborated with, and he's a phenomenal artist. But there was something really phenomenal about working with Les and with Armando together to do a blend of the comic book and the TV. That was real magic. You know, it really was wonderful.
I mean, yeah, you talked about like having trust in the writing room. I think working in comics, that trust is even more necessary.
You know, on the Marvel and DC books that I did, I had to do those in a comic book format.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about format. Is like,
which, by the way, all those scripts, including my scrapped Flash reboot from 2004.
Oh, I'm going to go read that ASAP.
That's there. But what's interesting about that is, so DC and Marvel had me write in comic book format, but I remember talking to Les, and I said, Les, look, Middleman's a TV pilot. And I said, look, the man has a degree from Savannah in sequential storytelling. I'm like, you forget more every day about sequential storytelling than I'll ever know. Can I give you the TV script and have you figure out how to lay it out? Which, I mean, was more work for him. But all of the Middleman scripts have been TV scripts, because honestly, Les is that good. Like, why would I trust me when I've got a guy who knows how to do it that well, you know? And that was the beginning of our collaboration. And I think in comics, you need to trust your artist, you know? And sometimes, you know, for me with the Middleman stuff, it was about saying, I don't want to write this out in comic book format, because you probably have better ideas than I do about when to start and how to distribute the storytelling, and that certainly worked out. So,
totally.
Well, this has been great. I can't help but think that there are some survival techniques that came out tonight that hopefully you guys at home who are looking to write in comic books.
I picked up so much.
Right?
Like,
Oh,
oh my
you.
God.
I'm going to become a writer now
but,
because of you.
But go to okbjgm.com, okbjgm. There are links there to the Children of Tendu podcast, to my downloads page, to my essays. There's the one about the creation of Lost. I also wrote one called the 11 Laws of Showrunning, which is about being a showrunner and working with showrunners and all that. If you're interested in what I do and all of that, that's, you know, I'm just trying to put something out there that'll be informational, and I hope it's useful.
And where can people find you socially?
I'm on Twitter at okbjgm, and also on Instagram and Tumblr with the same thing. And Facebook, they still haven't made it so I can't get any more friends, so I still friend people on Facebook, so there you go.
And a warning for anybody that's going to follow you on Instagram, get ready for a lot of pictures of furniture.
Lots of pictures of furniture.
Lots
I'm a
of
big
pictures.
furniture geek, yeah.
So, Adam, let's wrap this up. Where can people find you and all the Meltdown stuff?
All right, so yeah, you can find the store at Meltdown Comics on all forms of social media. You can find me at Uncanny Nerd Guy on all forms of social media. Not Facebook, I keep that one personal. Yeah, and if you ever need comic book stuff and you're in LA, I am the book manager here, so I got you.
Yes, he will be behind the shelf.
Yeah, I'll be right over there. Yeah, and that's me.
Cool. And of course, I'm Keith Tralins from LA Comic-Con, Stan Lee's Los Angeles Comic-Con, as I said earlier, October 27th to the 29th, his birthday weekend.
Excelsior!
So come out and join us. We have some big announcements for LA Comic-Con coming up in just a few weeks. We're going to be starting the pre-sale soon. Really big news. I'm very excited. Hopefully I'll be able to talk about it in next month's show. We have a really cool guest that's really going to shake up the process that we talk about for next time in June. So keep paying attention to this station. Also follow us at Stanley LA Comic-Con. You go to stanleyslacomiccon.com and make sure you sign up for our email blast so you can get news about Stanley's Los Angeles Comic-Con. And of course, as always, Meltdown Comics. And you can find me if you're interested at Keith Tralins. Keith Tralins, one word. Tralins is the word trains with an L stuck right in the middle of it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, Javi. Let's hear it for Javi.
If you had an ice cream flavor, it'd be Tralins and cream.
Yes.
Yes.
That would, yes.
Ben and Jerry's, get on it.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next month right here from
Good on you
Meltdown.
guys.
All right. Thank you, sir. That was- But by the way, that has happened.